Hello and welcome to JPD Weekly. At the end of this video, I have a major update on what's going on with the Daily Renegade website, and it is good news. But first, I want to explain to you the return of the Nephilim iceberg. Now, for those not familiar with the iceberg concept, it's the metaphor of an iceberg is often used to illustrate the concept of descending levels of a particular topic, each level more deep and intense than the last. So just like an iceberg, only a small portion is visible on the surface, while the vast majority of its mass lies hidden beneath the water. So in this metaphor, the visible portion of the iceberg represents the superficial or surface level of a topic, while the hidden portion represents the deeper and more significant aspects. And, this concept can be applied to a variety of fields, including psychology, sociology, politics, even literature. So, for instance, in psychology, the iceberg metaphor can be used to describe the conscious and unconscious mind. The visible tip of the iceberg represents the conscious mind, while the hidden portion beneath the surface represents the vast and complex workings of the unconscious mind. In politics, the iceberg metaphor can be used to describe the hidden power structures that operate behind the scenes, beyond the public's view. The visible portion of the iceberg represents the politicians and public figures who are visible to the public, while the hidden portion represents the shadowy world of lobbyists, special interest groups, and other actors who wield significant influence but operate out of the public eye. And in literature, the iceberg metaphor can be used to describe the layers of meaning and symbolism that lie beneath the surface of a text. The visible words on the page represents the surface level of the story, while the hidden layers of meaning represent the deeper themes and symbolism that the author has woven into the narrative. So I like the iceberg metaphor because it's a powerful tool for understanding the multi-layered nature of various topics, and it can help us recognize the hidden complexities and nuances that lie beneath the surface. So, in today's video, we're going to look at the return of the Nephilim iceberg. First, dealing with the possible ways the Nephilim returned after the flood. Then we're going to look at a possible return of the Nephilim in the future. Now, first, it's important, if you're brand new to this topic, it's important to understand who the Nephilim were. The Nephilim were a mysterious group of beings mentioned in the Bible and other ancient texts. The Nephilim comes from the Hebrew word Nephilim, or Nephal, which means fallen ones. And there's much debate and speculation over who or what the Nephilim were, with some people even believing that they could still exist today. Biblical accounts describe the Nephilim as being the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The phrase is used in Genesis 6, 1-4, which says, "When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with humans forever, because they are mortal, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." The identity of the sons of God has been a matter of a lot of debate. Some believe that they were angels who fell from heaven and took on human form, while others believe they were simply righteous men who descended from the line of Seth. Those who believe that the sons of God were angels point to other passages in the Bible, such as Job 1:6 and 2:1, where angels are referred to as sons of God. The Nephilim are described as being heroes of old, men of renown, suggesting that they were very powerful and influential individuals. Some have speculated that they may have been like literal giants, while others believe that they just possessed supernatural abilities. Now, aside from the biblical account, there are other ancient texts that mention the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch, which is not considered part of the biblical canon, but it is widely read and respected by many Christians, provides a more detailed account of the Nephilim. According to Enoch, the angels who fell from heaven taught humanity many things, including magic and the use of weapons. They also had children with human women, resulting in the creation of the Nephilim. The Book of Jubilees, we find some information from there. Jubilees is also not part of the biblical canon, but it is considered authoritative by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And it tells a similar story. According to Jubilees, a descendant of Noah named Kainam discovered a secret knowledge that allowed him to create creatures in the likeness of the Nephilim. So throughout history, there have been many individuals who have studied and taught about the Nephilim. In the early church, some church fathers, such as Justin Martyr and Tertullian, believed that the sons of God were angels who fell from heaven and took on human form. In more recent times, authors like Chuck Missler and Tom Horn, of course, have written extensively on the subject, exploring the possibility that the Nephilim may have been a race of giants or possibly even extraterrestrial beings, depending how you define that term. Now, despite the various theories and speculations about the Nephilim, their true identity it still remains mysterious. There's still some mystery around it. While the biblical account provides some clues, much of the information surrounding the Nephilim has been lost to time. Nevertheless, their story continues to capture the imaginations of people around the world, and their legacy lives on in various mythologies and legends. Myths and legends from around the world often feature supernatural beings that share similarities with the Nephilim of the Bible. These beings are typically depicted as powerful, otherworldly creatures that are often associated with gods, demigods, or heroes. For example, in Greek mythology, the Titans are a group of powerful deities who ruled during the legendary Golden Age. They were said to be the children of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth, and were known for their incredible strength and power. The Titans were eventually overthrown by their children, the Olympian gods, in a conflict known as Titanamity. It's hard to say. Another mythological figure that shares similarities with the Nephilim is the Hindu deity Hanuman. Hanuman is a monkey-like creature with incredible strength and agility, and is revered as a symbol of loyalty, devotion, and heroism. And according to Hindu mythology, Hanuman was the son of the wind god Vayu and was born with incredible strength and intelligence. He's often depicted as a protector of the weak and downtrodden, and is considered to be one of the most powerful beings in the Hindu pantheon. Norse mythology had giants. They were a race of supernatural beings who were known for their immense size and strength. They are often depicted as enemies of God and are said to have played a significant role in the events leading up to the end of the world in the myth of Ragnarok. Despite their fearsome reputation, however, the giants are often depicted as being somewhat sympathetic figures and are sometimes portrayed as being more intelligent and civilized than their godly counterparts. In the Babylonian creation myth, known as the Enuma Elish, the god Marduk is said to have battled and defeated the chaotic forces of Tiamat, a primordial goddess who represents the forces of chaos and disorder. In some versions of the myth, Tiamat is said to have created a race of monsters known as the Anunnaki, who were said to be incredibly powerful and dangerous creatures that could bring destruction and chaos to the world. In the legend of the Tengu from Japanese mythology. The Tengu are bird-like creatures with supernatural powers and abilities. They're often depicted as wise and powerful beings that are associated with mountains and forests, and are said to be able to fly through the air and control the weather. In some versions of the legend, the Tengu are said to be descended from the gods and are revered as protectors of the natural world. So these are just a few examples of the many myths and legends from around the world that feature supernatural beings that share similarities with the Nephilim of the Bible. With the specifics of these, or while the specifics of these stories vary widely depending on cultural context, they all do share a fascination with the idea of powerful otherworldly beings that are capable of incredible feats of strength. Isn't it interesting that all other religions, nations around the world have stories about these creatures? So now that you know who the Nephilim were, let's examine the 6 views on how the Nephilim might have returned after the flood. And then the 7th view, at the bottom of the iceberg, will be that they might return in the future. So we're going to look at that. The first view regarding the return of the Nephilim after the flood, and in case you're really not familiar with this, the idea is that angels mated with humans created Nephilim, and then God sent a flood to kill all the Nephilim, basically. There's a lot more to it, but that's the basic story. But then later on, in passages like Numbers, we find that somehow there are giants. So there's an ongoing question: how did they return after the flood if it was only Noah, Noah's sons, their wives, and Noah's wife? If that was the only people that survived, and all flesh was destroyed, then how did the Nephilim return? So the first view regarding the return of the Nephilim after the flood is that fallen angels were involved in their reappearance. So according to this view, some of the angels who had previously sinned by cohabitating with human women before the flood just repeated the act after the flood. A lot of times it's called a second incursion. And as a result, Nephilim were born again despite God's initial decision to destroy them with the flood. So one of the main biblical texts used to support this view is found in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, which describes the events that led to the appearance of the Nephilim before the flood. The passage talks about the sons of God, interpreted as fallen angels by some, by many, cohabiting with the daughters of men and producing offspring, the Nephilim. The same phrase, sons of God, is used in the book of Job, Job 1:6, 2:1, and 38:7, to refer to angels. Proponents of this view argue that the phrase refers to fallen angels in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, which implies that the reappearance of Nephilim after the flood was again through the same means. Another biblical text that supports this view is found in the book of Jude. Jude 1, 6, and 7 describes angels who left their proper dwelling and are kept in darkness until the judgment day. And according to this view, these angels could have been the ones responsible for cohabiting with human women before and after the flood, leading to the birth of the Nephilim. Now, proponents of this view also point to several extra biblical texts that mention the return of the Nephilim after the flood. The book of Enoch, which is not considered part of the biblical canon by most Christians, describes in detail the events that led to the reappearance of the Nephilim after the flood. The book talks about fallen angels who were punished for cohabiting with human women, but continued to do so after the flood, leading to the birth of the Nephilim. The book of Jubilees, another extra biblical text, also describes the return of the Nephilim after the flood. Now, historically, this view has been held by various individuals and groups. The Church Father Augustine of Hippo, in his work The City of God, believed that the angels mentioned in Genesis 6 were fallen angels who sinned by cohabiting with human women before and after the flood. The medieval Jewish scholar Rashi also believed that the sons of God in Genesis 6 were angels. While this view has its proponents, it also has its critics. Some argue that the phrase sons of God in Genesis 6 could refer to the descendants of Seth or other godly men, not fallen angels. Others point out that the passage in Jude does not specifically mention fallen angels cohabiting with human women, but rather mentions them leaving their proper dwelling. So, in conclusion, for this first view on the return of the Nephilim after the flood, that is that fallen angels were involved in their reappearance, and proponents of this view use biblical texts like Genesis 6 and Jude 1, as well as extra biblical texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees to support their position. And again, historical figures like Augustine of Hippo and Rashi also held to this view, but there are critics of this view who interpret the biblical text differently and offer alternative explanations. The second view of how the Nephilim could have returned after the flood suggests that the wives of Noah's sons, or the sons' wives, the wives of Noah's sons, carried the Nephilim gene. Now, this theory is based on the interpretation of Genesis 6:4, which states the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. So according to this view, the Nephilim gene was present in the women who married Noah's sons and entered the ark. The gene was then passed on to their offspring, which would have included both human and Nephilim. And as a result, some of the post-flood population would have been Nephilim, and the giants would have continued to exist in the world, even if at a diminished capacity. One of the main advantages of this view is that it provides a simple explanation for how the Nephilim could have survived the flood. If the gene was present in the women who entered the ark, it would have been carried on to future generations. Additionally, this view does not require any supernatural intervention, making it more plausible to some. However, there are also some potential drawbacks to this theory. One issue is that there is no explicit mention of Nephilim genes in the biblical text. Now, while it's possible that this gene did exist, there's no direct evidence to support this claim. Additionally, it is unclear why the women who married Noah's sons would have carried the Nephilim gene in the first place, given that the Nephilim were the result of a union between angels and humans. So, but again, it does say that all flesh was corrupted. But despite these potential issues, there are some historical figures who have held to this view. So, for example, in the Middle Ages, the Jewish Rabbi Rashi suggested that the Nephilim survived the flood through Noah's daughter-in-law, Naamah, who was said to have Nephilim ancestry. Similarly, in the 17th century, the Dutch theologian Johannes Cosius argued that the Nephilim could have survived the flood through the wives of Noah's sons. In terms of extra-biblical texts, there are some ancient Jewish writings that mention the idea of Nephilim genes being present in the post-flood population. For example, the Book of Jubilees, again a Second Temple Jewish text, states that the Nephilim survived the flood because they were already present in the earth before the flood. The Book of Enoch, another Second Temple Jewish text, also suggests that the Nephilim were present after the flood. So overall, the second view of how the Nephilim could have returned after the flood suggests that the wives of Noah's sons carried the Nephilim gene. While there are some potential drawbacks to the theory, there are also historical and extra-biblical sources that support this view. All right, number 3. The third idea suggests that some of the giants that existed before the flood may have managed to survive either by being on board the ark or by some other means. Now, while this view is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, obviously, some scholars have put forward several biblical and extra-biblical texts to support this theory. So one of the main biblical texts used to support this view is found in Numbers 13:33. In that passage, the Israelite spies are sent to the land of Canaan and report back that they saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak. This report seems to suggest that the Nephilim still existed long after the flood. Another passage which some scholars use to support this theory is found in Genesis 6:4, which says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were heroes of old, men of renown. This passage seems to suggest that the Nephilim existed both before and after the flood. Now, in addition to biblical texts, some extra biblical texts have been used to support the idea that the Nephilim just survived the flood. For example, and a lot of this is up to interpretation too. But for example, the Book of Enoch, a Jewish apocryphal text, provides a detailed account of the origin of the Nephilim and their actions on earth. The Book of Giants, a fragmentary text found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, also provides detailed account of the Nephilim and their activities on earth. Historically, several individuals have held the view that the Nephilim just survived the flood. For example, the medieval Jewish scholar, once again, Rashi, believed that the Nephilim survived the flood, citing Genesis 6 as evidence. Similarly, the 19th century Christian apologist George Smith believed that the Nephilim survived the flood and that they were responsible for the construction of various ancient structures, including the pyramids of Egypt. Despite the biblical and extra-biblical texts that have been used to support the idea that the Nephilim survived the flood either on the ark or by some other means, this theory is not without its criticisms, obviously. One of the main criticisms is that the biblical text used to support this view can be interpreted in many different ways, and there's no explicit statement in the flood or in the Bible that supports the idea that the Nephilim survived the flood. Additionally, some scholars argue that the idea of the Nephilim surviving the flood goes against the very purpose of the flood, which was to wipe out all Nephilim off of the earth. Now, in conclusion to this view, while the view that the Nephilim survived the flood is not a widely accepted view, it has been put forward by some scholars throughout history. The biblical texts used to support this view are subject to interpretation, and some extra-biblical texts have also been used to support this theory. However, this view, again, is not without its criticisms and remains a controversial topic within biblical scholarship. The fourth view regarding the return of the Nephilim is that they were brought back through genetic manipulation after the flood. So this view suggests that the fallen angels or some humans found the genetic code of the Nephilim somehow and used it to create new hybrids, perhaps through the dead bodies of Nephilim that probably would have been all over the place after the flood. Now, the idea of genetic manipulation is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, but some proponents of this view argue that it is implied in Genesis 6:4, which states that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards. So the phrase also afterwards suggests that Nephilim obviously returned after the flood. Not everybody interprets it that way, but that's one way. Proponents of this view also point to extra-biblical texts, like, again, the Book of Enoch, which describes fallen angels teaching humans various forms of knowledge, including the art of making weapons, cosmetics, and other items. Maybe they taught genetic manipulation as well. These texts suggest that fallen angels had knowledge beyond what was commonly known at the time, which could have included genetic manipulation. Another possible source of evidence for this view is the existence of legends and myths in various cultures that describe beings that resemble the Nephilim. For example, again, as we mentioned before, the Greek myth of the Titans and the Hindu legend of the Asuras both describe powerful spiritual beings that are spiritual-ish, godlike beings that resemble the Nephilim. Now, one possible weakness of this view is that it requires a significant amount of scientific knowledge and technology that might not have been available in ancient times. However, some proponents argue that it is possible that the knowledge was lost over time, or that it was only known by a select few individuals. Historically, this view has not been as widely held as some of the others, but it has gained popularity in recent years, particularly among those who believe in ancient astronaut theories and the possibility of extraterrestrials. So in summary, this view suggests that the Nephilim returned through genetic manipulation after the flood. While this view is not explicitly supported by the Bible, it is based on some interpretations of biblical texts and is supported by some extra-biblical sources. The idea of genetic manipulation requires a significant amount of scientific knowledge and technology, but some proponents suggest that that is possible, that such knowledge was available in ancient times. The fifth view regarding the Nephilim is that they were not physical beings, but rather spiritual or symbolic entities. This view is not widely held and is often considered a minority position, but it does have some support among some biblical scholars and theologians. One argument for this view is that the term Nephilim is often translated as giants, but it can also be translated as fallen ones or those who have fallen. This interpretation suggests that the Nephilim were not physical giants, but rather spiritual beings who had fallen from grace or rebelled against God. Another argument is that the descriptions of the Nephilim in the Bible are often symbolic or metaphorical. For example, in the book of Numbers, the Israelite spies who are sent to scout out the land of Canaan describe the people there as strong and like giants, and we get that from Numbers 13:28-33. However, this description is likely, or could be exaggerated in this view, for rhetorical effect and does not necessarily refer to physical giants. That's what this view would say. So proponents of this view also point to other passages in the Bible that suggest the Nephilim were not physical beings. For example, in the book of Job, the term sons of God is used to refer to angels, Job 1:6. And in the New Testament, the phrase sons of God is used to describe believers who have been adopted into God's family. We get that from John 1:12 and Romans 8:14. However, this view has several challenges and criticisms. One of the main challenges is that the Bible does not describe the Nephilim, that the Bible does describe the Nephilim as physical beings who were the offspring of human women and fallen angels. Additionally, the term Nephilim is often used in the Bible in conjunction with physical descriptions such as mighty and men of renown, like in Genesis 6:4. Furthermore, many scholars and theologians argue that interpreting the Nephilim as purely symbolic or metaphorical undermines the historical and cultural context of the Bible. They argue that the ancient Israelites would have understood the Nephilim as physical beings, and interpreting them as symbolic entities imposes a modern Western perspective on the text. Despite these criticisms, the view that the Nephilim were not physical beings continues to be held by some scholars and theologians. It's often seen as a way to reconcile the biblical account of the Nephilim with modern scientific understandings of the world, which reject the existence of physical giants or hybrid beings. So overall, while the view that the Nephilim were not physical beings is not widely held, it does have some support among biblical scholars and theologians. However, it remains a minority position and is subject to criticism and challenges from those who interpret the Bible more literally. The sixth view concerns the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees is a pseudepigraphical text that was likely written in the Second Temple period, around 200 BC to 100 AD, unless that's a copy from an older, it could be older, and then it was just copied. So that could be it too. But it's considered a retelling of the book of Genesis with additional details and stories. So in Jubilees, the story of the Nephilim returning after the flood is connected to the character of Kainam, who is not mentioned in the Bible, but is identified as the fourth son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem. According to Jubilees, Kainam discovered some ancient writings that were left by the antediluvian patriarchs, including Adam, Seth, and Enoch. These writings contained knowledge about the heavenly bodies, the seasons, and the divisions of time. Kainam studied these writings and became wise in the ways of the world. However, Kainam also found a description of how the Watchers, the fallen angels who had fathered the Nephilim before the flood, had created their offspring. The description included details of how the Watchers had taken human women as wives and had taught them the secrets of heaven, including the arts of magic and divination. The Watchers then used their knowledge to create monstrous offspring that were part human, part angelic. Kainam followed the instructions in the ancient writings and used his knowledge to create new Nephilim. He took a wife and fathered a son who was perfect in all his ways, but who had the flesh of the giants. We get that from Jubilees 7:24. This son, who is not named in Jubilees, was likely seen as a new type of Nephilim, created through Kainam's knowledge of the Watcher's techniques. The Book of Jubilees does not provide any details about how Kainam was able to create new Nephilim or whether he worked alone or with others. However, the story implies that Kainam's discovery of the ancient writings and his subsequent actions led to the reappearance of the Nephilim on the earth. The idea that the Nephilim returned through Kainam's discovery is not widely accepted in mainstream Christian theology, as Jubilees is not considered part of the canon of Scripture. However, the story does offer an interesting perspective on the possible origins of the Nephilim after the flood. Some historical individuals, such as the ancient Jewish historian Josephus, reference the Nephilim and their possible survival after the flood. Josephus wrote that the Nephilim were enormous and terrible, and that they had survived the flood by hiding in caves and other secret places. And we get that from Antiquities of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 2. Modern-day proponents of the theory of ancient aliens have also suggested that the Nephilim were extraterrestrial beings who visited the Earth in ancient times and who may have returned after the flood. However, that view is not widely accepted by mainstream scholars and is often dismissed as pseudoscientific. So in conclusion to this view, the Book of Jubilees offers a unique perspective on the possible origins of the Nephilim after the flood, suggesting that Kainam's discovery of ancient writings may have led to the creation of new Nephilim. While this view is not widely accepted in mainstream Christian theology, it does offer an interesting perspective on the possible origins of the Nephilim and their connection to ancient knowledge and wisdom. All right, we are at the bottom rung, the very last part of the iceberg, and this concerns a future return of the Nephilim. Now, there are various views on whether the Nephilim will return in the future. Some Bible prophecy teachers believe that there will be a future resurgence of the Nephilim or similar entities, while others do not. So from a biblical perspective, some point to passages such as Matthew 24:37-39, which speaks of the days of Noah and the sudden destruction that came upon the earth. Some interpret this to mean that just as there were Nephilim in the days of Noah, there will be similar entities in the end time. Additionally, Revelation 9:1-11 describes a vision of locusts that come out of the abyss, with the leader being described as the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and Greek is Apollyon. Some interpret this as a description of a demonic army or even a reference to the Nephilim themselves. There are also extra-biblical texts that some believe provide evidence for a future return of the Nephilim. For example, the Book of Enoch speaks of a time when the Nephilim will return and wreak havoc upon earth. The Book of Enoch, again, it's an ancient Jewish religious work that dates back to the Second Temple period, around 300 BC to 100 AD, but again, that could be a copy and it could be a much older book. This text was not included in the Jewish canon or the Christian Old Testament, but it was widely circulated and read in the early Christian church. The Book of Enoch includes a section that describes the origins of the Nephilim, their corruption of humanity, and their ultimate judgment. In the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim are described, again, as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These beings were said to be giants who possessed great power and knowledge, and according to Enoch, the Nephilim were, again, responsible for teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, including use of weapons, cosmetics, and sorcery. They also engaged in violence and sexual immorality, corrupting the earth and leading humanity astray. Now, in the Book of Enoch, God sends the archangel Raphael to earth to punish the Nephilim and their parents. The text states that the Nephilim will be destroyed in a great flood, just like the rest of humanity. The fallen angels who fathered the Nephilim will be imprisoned in the underworld, awaiting their final judgment. However, the Book of Enoch also speaks of a future time when the Nephilim will return on earth. The text describes a vision that Enoch has of the end times in which the Nephilim are released from their imprisonment and wreak havoc on earth. Enoch writes, quote, And I saw that after this generation of the angels, the fallen angels who fathered the Nephilim, there will be another generation, many times more numerous, and these will be more corrupt than the former. And I looked again towards the earth, and I saw a fire kindled in the midst of the darkness. And I saw mountains burning with fire, and I saw waters of the fountains boiling, and I saw the abyss of the earth opened. And I saw many fires descending, which cannot be counted. Every mortal man was afraid, and I trembled with great fear. Sounds a lot like Revelation. This passage suggests that the Nephilim will return to the earth in the end times, bringing with them destruction and chaos. Some biblical scholars and religious leaders have pointed to this passage as evidence that the Nephilim will play a role in the events leading up to the second coming of Christ and the end of the world. In modern times, some Christian writers and speakers have used the Book of Enoch to support their belief in a future return of the Nephilim. For example, my very good friend L.A. Marzulli. If you're not familiar, he's a Christian author and speaker. He's written extensively on the subject, and he's argued that the Nephilim are not only mentioned in the Bible, but also in ancient texts and myths from around the world. Marzulli believes that the Nephilim will return to the earth in the end times, possibly as part of a great deception by Satan to lead humanity astray. However, not all biblical scholars and religious leaders agree with this interpretation of the Book of Enoch. Some argue that the passage about the future return of the Nephilim is meant to be symbolic rather than literal. Others point out that the Book of Enoch is not considered canonical by most Christian churches and should therefore not be given the same weight as the Bible. So, in conclusion to this view, the Book of Enoch speaks of a time when the Nephilim will return to the earth and bring destruction and chaos. This passage has been used by some religious leaders and scholars to support their belief in a future return of the Nephilim. However, not all Christians agree with this interpretation of the text, and that is okay, because the most important thing is to know that we can disagree as brothers and sisters in Christ on these non-salvational issues and still love and respect for each other. Now, similarly, the Dead Sea Scrolls contain references to the return of the sons of God and mighty ones, which some interpret as a reference to the Nephilim. The Dead Sea Scrolls were a collection of Jewish texts discovered between 1947 and 1956 in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. These scrolls provide insight on the beliefs and practices of a Jewish sect known as the Essenes, who lived in the region during the Second Temple period in Qumran. Among the many texts found in the Dead Sea Scrolls are several that have been interpreted as referring to a return of the sons of God and mighty ones, which some interpret as a reference to the Nephilim. One that we mentioned before, one of the most significant ones, is the Book of Giants, which is actually part of the Enochian literature found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Book of Giants tells the story of a group of angels who came to Earth and father children with human women. These children grow into giants, and their hybrid nature causes chaos and destruction on Earth. The story parallels the biblical account of the Nephilim in Genesis 6, 1-4, and some scholars believe that the giants mentioned in the Book of Giants are a type of Nephilim. The Book of Giants describe a time when the giants, or mighty ones, will return to the earth and, again, wreak havoc upon it. The book mentions a number of named giants. There's even stories of Gilgamesh, who's described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, who's known for his legendary strength and exploits. There's other giants mentioned: Oya, who has great teeth and a fair face, and Haya, who is covered with hair and arms like the legs of a goat. The Book of Giants goes on to describe how the giants engaged in warfare with each other and with human beings, and how their actions caused chaos and destruction on the earth. The book also describes how the giants are ultimately defeated and destroyed by the forces of God. So some scholars have suggested that the Book of Giants reflects a belief in a future return of the Nephilim, or hybrid beings. They point to the fact that the text speaks of a time when the giants will return to the earth and cause chaos and destruction, and they interpret this as a prophecy of some sort. Others argue that the book is simply a reflection of the belief that the Nephilim were once present on earth and their actions caused chaos and destruction. Overall, the Dead Sea Scrolls provide valuable insights into the beliefs and practices of a Jewish sect that lived during the Second Temple period. The Book of Giants in particular sheds light on the Jewish belief in the existence of giants, or Nephilim, and their potential return to earth. Now, while the interpretation of these texts remains a subject of debate among scholars, they provide a fascinating glimpse into the rich tapestry of Jewish texts and beliefs. Now, throughout history, there have been a number of individuals who have spoken about a possible future return of the Nephilim. So, for example, in the 2nd century AD, the early church father Tertullian wrote about the belief that the Nephilim would return in the end times. In more recent times, some modern Bible prophecy teachers, such as Chuck Missler, L.A. Marzulli, and many others, have spoken about the possibility of a future return of the Nephilim. However, it's important to note that not all Bible prophecy teachers believe in a future return of the Nephilim. Some believe that the Nephilim were unique to the days of Noah and will not reappear in the future. Regardless of whether one believes in a future return of the Nephilim or not, it is important to focus on the biblical message of redemption and salvation through Jesus Christ. As 2 Peter 3:9 says, "The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance." And that is something we can all hopefully agree on. So the point of this video was just to lay out some of the different views, not necessarily to sway you to one view or another. And even with this, I'm undecided myself. There's a few of these that I don't think are very likely, and some that are more likely. But it's interesting, and of course, I want to know what you think. Leave us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, set notifications, so whenever we put up a new video, you are aware of it. All right, so that is it. That is the entire Return of the Nephilim Iceberg explained. And now for that big announcement I alluded to from the beginning of the video. As many of you already know, we have been having some issues with our current Daily Renegade website. Well, we have now decided to partner with Uscreen, a phenomenal internet company, and the same one that Skywatch TV uses for their conferences, to build a brand new website and, if all goes well, a phone and TV app in the hopefully near future. Now, I know I haven't been posting new content as much lately, but that is all going to change hopefully soon. The reason is I've been focused on the behind-the-scenes stuff of Daily Renegade, working to get you guys a better website and an overall more enjoyable experience for all of our members. I will provide additional details in the near future, but for now, just know that we are currently in the process of switching over, and we will make another big announcement when it is all finished, and we will explain how everything will work going forward in the future. I really think you're going to enjoy what we have coming, so stick with us. And I also want to give a very big thank you to all who are supporting us financially right now. We could not do this without you. We've had a couple of close calls with Daily Renegade where we've almost had to just close it down because just the funds weren't there. But you guys have really been stepping up. We pray that you continue to do so if you're able to, and even if not financially, prayerfully. We can always use your prayer. Please help keep us in prayer, that God gives us wisdom and shows us the paths that he wants us to take. So, that being said, thank you all so much. That is all for today's episode of JPD Weekly. Until next time, love you all. Take care and God bless.